Hi, I'm Lynn Cornell, and welcome to Journey Through the Bible Verse by Verse. Grab your Bibles and follow along as we study through each book of the Bible, verse by verse and chapter by chapter. Now, I'm using the Holman Christian Standard Bible, so if you're reading from a different Bible translation, the read is different, the message is the same. We're going to continue in our study through the 8th chapter of the Gospel of Luke, and we're going to pick it up at verse 19. Now, we left off with Jesus going through his teaching on the parable of the sower who sows the seed, which translate in God sowing his words in the hearts of people. And there were four different grounds, as it were. There were four different way people had received the word. Three of them did not receive the word properly, meaning they did not receive it in the honest heart. Therefore, the word was taken away from them. And only one received it in the honest heart and thus bore fruit. And that's why Jesus exhorted in verse 18 that take heed how you listen to the word. Why? Because how you listen to the word can determine what is taken away from you, which reflects their heart. See, the heart of unbelief. All right, verse 19. So it said, then his mother and brothers came to him, and they could not meet him because of the crowd. He was told, your mother and your brothers are standing outside wanting to see you. But he replied to them, my mother and my brothers are those who hear the word and do the word of God. Now, of course, Luke doesn't go into the details of it, but his own family did not believe in him. And in fact, they were there to seize control of him because they said he is out of his mind. And so he sort of responds to them by saying, who is my mother and who is my brother? And that is interesting in itself, by the way, that Jesus did not believe in nepotism. He didn't believe in the family business, that the family get in no matter what. It's contrary to most churches, organizations, and businesses today. All right. Verse 22. On that day, he and his disciples got into a boat, and he told them, let us cross over to the other side of the lake. So they set out, and as they were sailing, he fell asleep. Then a fierce windstorm came down on the lake, and they were being swamped, and they were in danger. They came to and woke him up, and saying, Master, Master, we're going to die. Then he got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waves. So they ceased, and there was a calm. And he said to them, where is your faith? And they were fearful and amazed, asking one another, who can this be? He commands even the winds and the waves, and they obey him. Now, kind of interesting that they should have had this faith by now of him. You know, they should have known this is the Messiah. How many miracles do you have to work in order to be convinced of that? Verse 26. And then they sailed to the region of Gennesaret, the Gerasenes. They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. And when he got out of the boat, a demon-possessed man from the town met him. And for a long time, he had worn no clothes and did not stay in the house, but in the tombs. And when he saw Jesus, he cried out, fell down before him, and said in a loud voice, What do you have to do with me, Jesus, you Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torment me. For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man, and many times it had seized him, and though he was guarded, bounded by chains and shackles, he would snap the restraints and be driven by the demons into the desert places. Now, one of the things you see, contrary to the portrayals of supernatural demons and stuff on earth, you always see Hollywood's portrayal of demons like they're fearless before God, how they curse God, how they, thumb their noses and flail their fists at God, And as we can see right here, they were petrified of God. They were petrified of him. Okay. Verse 30. And by the way, you see this really, this extreme case of demon possession that was so bad that they could not even contain this man. You see this strength, but he would break the chains. Verse 30, what is your name? Jesus asked him. Legion, he said. Now, a legion was, I think about a squadron, if I'm not mistaken, about maybe about 72,000 men, or 6,000 men, I'm sorry. About 6,000 men. So they could be anywhere. I'm going to say that a legion would be anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 men. Okay, I'm off my mind. I can't remember which one is which here. But it was that many demons inside of him. That itself, of course, is amazing in itself. Now, what is your name? Jesus asked him. Legion, he said, because many demons had entered him. And they begged him not to banish him to the abyss. Notice they begged him, not, cursing Jesus out and all that. Verse 32, and a large herd of pigs were there feeding on the hillside. And the demons begged him to permit them to enter the pigs. And he gave them permission. And the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs. And the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. And when the men who tended them saw what had happened, they ran off and reported to the town in the countryside. Now, you may ask, why did Jesus give them permission to go into the pigs? And we don't particularly know. But the question could be raised, was it lawful even for the pigs to be there? Okay, so that's another thing. Verse 35, then the people went out to see what had happened. And they came to Jesus and found the man the demons had departed from, sitting at Jesus' foot, dressed in his right mind. And they were afraid. Now again, notice this fear that comes over people when they have a true encounter with Jesus. That they were, But notice also that they saw this man that they knew was demon possessed. He was clothed in his right mind. Verse 36, meanwhile, the eyewitnesses reported to them how the demon-possessed man was delivered, and all the people of the Gerasene region asked him to leave them because they were gripped by great fear. And oftentimes superstitions probably drove this fear. They didn't know if they were going to be judged. They didn't know what to expect with Jesus. So, getting into the boat, he returned. Verse 38, and the man from whom the demons had departed kept begging him to be with him, but he sent them away and said, go back to your home and tell all that God had done for you. And he went off and proclaimed throughout the town that all that Jesus had done for them. Now, what is interesting about this, that Jesus didn't allow this man to follow him. And I just, and for whatever reason, God had already chosen his 12. And let me put it this way. God had chosen his 12. And it wasn't God's will for this man to be a part of his team. Despite the fact that this man would have been one of the most faithful and devoted followers. But Jesus said, go back to your home. But now also notice this, that man, when he went back and he proclaimed all that Jesus did. So he became a preacher of the gospel. So in a sense, he was being even used greater. Because while Jesus was over here, he was over there preaching. So, verse 40. When Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Just then, a man named Jairus came, and he was a leader of the synagogue. He fell down at Jesus' feet and pleaded with him to come to his house, because he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was at death's door. And while he was going, the crowds were nearly crushing him. And the woman suffered from a bleeding for 12 years, who had spent all she had on doctors, yet could not be healed by any, approached from behind and touched the tassel of his robe, and instantly her bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. And when they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowds are hemming on you and pressing against you. He said, someone did touch me. Jesus said, I know that power is going out from me. Now, to kind of note that that the power of God is tangible. It was a tangible force. And then Jesus felt that power go out. And of course, that power affected healings and cures. Verse 47, when the woman saw that she was discovered, she came trembling and fell down before him in the presence of all the people. And she declared the reason she had touched him and how she was instantly cured. Daughter, he said, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Now, this is, of course, she could have been in trouble by coming out in her condition. Verse 49, and while he was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house saying, your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore. And when Jesus heard it, he answered him, don't be afraid, only believe, and she will be made well. And based upon that word, think about this. Now he goes further. Now you have to think about it, that when he saw his servant, he had to know what news they were going to tell him. Why else would they come? And yet, based upon this word now, he believes Jesus. Verse 51, after he had came to the house, he let no one enter with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. And everyone was crying and mourning for her. But he said, stop crying, for she is not dead but asleep. And they started laughing at him because they knew she was dead. So he took her by the hand and called out, child, get up. And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. Then he gave orders that she be given something to eat, and her parents were astounded, but he instructed them to tell no one what had happened. Now, one of the things that's interesting here is that notice he said, and Luke, by the way, is saying this. Remember, even in this story, notice what Luke is saying. That Luke is saying he kind of diagnoses her problem that she had a bleeding, that the woman had a bleeding. But notice Luke says here in 55, verse 55, that her spirit returned. And that's interesting when you talk about life and death. Well, what constitutes death, or what constitutes life? Not only the functions of the physical body, but understand that when your spirit leaves, comes and leaves. In other words, your death really happens the moment your spirit leaves. And so he said that when Jesus raised her from the dead and cured her, her spirit returned. That meaning she was dead. And that's interesting. All right, we're going to pick it up with chapter 9 next time, so I'll see you then.